Morning, guys. My name is Matthew. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, I'm really nervous today, and I've had a friend remind me, it's not about you, and I wish that made me feel better, because I know it's not about me. I know it's about the still suffering alcoholic or that newcomer who's struggling and needs to hear a message. But I'm an alcoholic, so I'm hardwired to only think about myself always. And I think part of that fear comes from the fact that my parents and my aunt are here, and I want to be able to tell this story in a way that acknowledges their pain and their experience of me. Because for a really long time, I was so stuck in myself, and I never thought of how I was affecting my family, how I was affecting my parents, how I was affecting my friends and the people around me. And today I want to be able to share this story in a way that validates their experiences of me. So last year I did my 1-year share, and I was beating myself up because I didn't think I focused enough on what it's like now. And I loved going to meetings and hear people share about kind of what this program's done for them. That's the hope part of this program. And I didn't focus enough on it last year, and I was beating myself up about it. So that's where I want to start today. I want to start with how incredible my life has been in the past 2 years. And this past year in particular, there's been so much change in my life. And again, I'm an alcoholic, so I'm reminded of I love my little safety bubble and my comfort zone, and stepping out of that is terrifying for me. But whenever I get to the other side of that change, it's been incredible because I'm able to look back at experiences and be like, oh my goodness, can't believe I got through that, and I got through it sober. Firstly, I was thinking of how to get out of this share, but I was like, oh my goodness, my parents got on a flight to come down here. My aunt got on a flight to come down here. It's I can't. So I turned 30 this year, and I turned 30, guys, and I was so scared of turning 30. I held on to this image before I even came into recovery of what 30 would look like for me, and I wanted the husband, and I wanted the white picket fence, and I wanted the kids, and I wanted the booming career, and I turned 30 in a rehab. And when I look back at 28 for me, I was surrounded by people, but probably the most alone that I've ever felt. I remember people sharing about it when I first came into the rooms, about the loneliness and the void and the emptiness, and I could relate to that. So at 28, I was around people, but I felt alone. And when I was 29, I was in the halfway house, surrounded by people that are here today in this circle, which is incredible. Thank you. And then I turned 33 months ago, surrounded by the most amount of people, and I was so happy because today I have genuine connections with people, and that's amazing. I want to say, Mom, I have friends now, which is cool. I have friends today. So I turned 30 this year. I started working with my sponsor this year, and I get so many questions is it not weird? Is it strange that you worked with her? And I love it. She might say something different, but I love it. I have loved every single moment of working with her because she knows me. 2.5 years ago, I was sitting in treatment, and they told me, ask, listen, do as you're told, follow suggestions. And there was a hike coming up. It was a 14-kilometer hike. And what I know about myself today is I don't like hiking. I don't like anything to do with outdoorsy stuff. It's just not me. So anyway, I decided I'm going to do what I'm told. I'm going to go on this hike. Anyone who was on this hike with me will know, I suffered. It was painful. And my relationship with my sponsor is I was on this hike, and we got to the very end, and there's this steep hill, and I was crying, right? Because my ability to deal with anything hard at that time was okay, I don't have alcohol as a crutch, and I don't know how to regulate my emotions, so I'm just going to cry. And I was crying through this, and I was telling my sponsor, I can't do this, right? And my alcoholic brain told me I would rather turn back and do 11 Ks and go back the way we came, or, not have to go through the steep hill. And I'm telling her I can't do this, and I'm crying, and she's right there next to me, and she's fit, right? She's right there next to me, and she's giving me these energy sweets. She's giving me energy sweets. So she's trying to boost my energy, guys, not mind or mood altering. But she's giving me these little energy sweets, and I'm trudging up this hill, and she's right there next to me, and that's been our relationship, like, because I've had moments of crippling self-doubt this past year, and fear, debilitating fear, and she's been there for me, telling me I can do it, and don't want to get emotional about this, but yeah, it's been a lot of me saying, like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And her saying, no, just do it. And pushing me and saying sink or swim. And I've been really surprised by the fact that I've swam through it. I haven't sunk, I haven't drowned. It's felt like that in moments. And she's pushed me, and it's been amazing. So I love that. This year as well, like, service took on a whole new meaning for me. When I was in treatment, like, we were asked a lot of questions around, do you ever want to sponsor people? Do you ever want to help people? And my immediate answer was no. I don't want to help anyone. I came into treatment to get better for me. And today, like, I work in an environment where I'm constantly having to give of myself, and I love it. Like, through this journey this past year, I've gotten to see people grow and flourish and thrive, and it's amazing. From where I was 2.5 years ago, not wanting to give of myself, not wanting to think of anyone. It's like today I give of myself, and I give of myself freely, because this program's done so much for me. It's like I know today I have a responsibility and an obligation to do the same for others. And yeah, I have connections today, and I have friends today, and I have friends that check on me and that love me. And there's a saying in this program, it's like, I'll love you until you can love yourself. And that's been what my friends do for me, and my second family, which is cool. So I'm going to double back now, because my dad is really into home videos. So my entire life growing up, my dad would take videos of us, my brother and I. So I have a brother, and he would take videos of us. And back then I couldn't see the value in that. Like, it was just a camera in my face as we're just doing random things, and I couldn't see the value of it. But I've been able to look back at those videos and kind of see who I was. So at like 5 years old, I felt a little bit different, right? And it wasn't because of anyone else, but what I would have told you back then is like, it's everyone who's making me feel this way. It's my brother, it's my dad, it's my mom, it's my aunt, it's my family. That's what I would have told you back then. But there's a video that I saw last year, and I was really young. I was 5 years old, and my brother was playing with my cousin, and they weren't playing with me. So I was like put off, and I was sad, and my dad's behind the camera, and I'm telling him, they won't play with me, Dad. And I think he tells my mom, and they tell my brother, no, you must play with her, include her. So how that 5-year-old dealt with situations is kind of how I continued to deal with them until I came into this program. So in that moment, I assigned this role to my dad of like savior and protector, which is all well and good, but the problem with me is I have super unrealistic expectations of people. So I expected my dad to pick up the pieces for me. I expected my mom to pick up the pieces, my family to pick up the pieces. And yeah, that's how I dealt with life. When I was in second grade, I remember failing I failed. And what I did with that failure, because I'm a very fearful individual, right? So what I did with that failure is like, the report card is written in red ink. I cross it out, I put it in blue, and I present that to my mom as if she's going to accept it. And like, I obviously got in lots of trouble. I didn't register that I couldn't get away with anything like that, right? But that's what I do with fear, is I will try and get out of it and get out of consequences. So in second grade, I did that. I got in trouble, but I didn't learn from that. And I carried on that behavior until I came into treatment, which was my ability to deal with fear was to either just hide away or cower or bury my head in the sand and act like it wasn't even there. When I was 10, we moved from Zimbabwe to a place called Tanzania. And I felt like the awkward, shy girl. I spoke different. I was a little bit weird. I was bullied during that time. I was like an easy target for that stuff, right? Like I was just coming from a different country. I was a little bit weird. And at some point in high school, I decided, well, I wasn't going to take that anymore. I was going to start to stand up for myself. And then I became the bully. So when I was 17, I was suspended from school for bullying. And I remember a counselor came in to talk to us and talk us through, myself and the other girls who were bullying this poor 8th grader, and talk us through it. And what I took from that moment was, wow, I finally fit in now. Like I didn't have any remorse or guilt over what I'd done to this poor 8th grade girl who this experience probably stayed with her for the rest of her life. I don't know. But I remember thinking I finally fit in because I never felt like I fit in. And I had this group of friends and we were bullying people and we were fighting and it was amazing, right? And that fear that I initially moved into the country with was gone because I felt like I could adapt really well in different group settings and I was good. I'm saying all that to say, like, this is before I even touched a drug or an alcoholic drink. You know, my need to prove myself or be accepted was really high, and yeah, it was all consuming back then. And then when I was 16, after I was suspended, we moved to Kenya. And again, that feeling of being separate and apart from kind of came back. And I remember being resentful at my mom, which that's the crazy part, right? Resentful at someone who is working really hard to afford me different opportunities in life. I was resentful because I was being pulled away from the group that I knew. You know, now I'm going to have to start again. And woe is me. I'm such a self-piteous victim. And I moved to this place. And what happened there is I found the sickest people. You know, and I gravitated to them because that's what I do. You know, in any room when I'm not working this program, I gravitate to the sickest people. And I did. And they had their own stuff going on. I had my own stuff going on. And we kind of trauma bonded. I hate that word trauma because it wasn't. I don't come from a traumatic background. I have two incredibly loving parents, an incredibly loving extended family. I have parents who have supported me. And loved me and picked up the pieces where they shouldn't have, where I should have been grown up enough to pick up my own pieces. But that's the family that I have. But because I'm an alcoholic and I suffer from delusions, that's what I thought. I thought I'm not loved, I'm not seen, I'm not heard. And it was a whole process of starting over in this new school again with people that I didn't know. But at least I had those two friends that were just as sick as me. And that's before I even touch a drink. Right? I'm still trying to be accepted. I'm still trying to fit in. And then I move again. And I went to university. So my entire life, I just wanted to feel free. Right? And I wanted to feel free from my mom, who I felt like was controlling and overbearing. And my family, who was always on my case. I was always the girl in school who had potential. Matty has so much potential. She can never live up to her potential. And it's like I was too lazy to really put in the effort or the action in anything. So, yeah, I moved and I went to university, and that was the most free I'd ever felt, right? Like I felt like, wow, I'm away from my family now. I can do whatever I want, and I'm a good starter, right? So I went for this degree and I started it really well. I even passed my first year, and then I meet a guy. And then my whole world changes, because another thing about me is I'm extremely codependent in relationships. So I met this guy and everything just kind of fell apart for me. I felt like I was in love, but I was 19 and like, what do I really know about love? I think I'm only starting to learn what love is now, and that's through this program. But yeah, I felt like I was in love. And when he left me, I was broken. It was an abusive relationship on both sides, and we were drinking, and it was fun until it wasn't, and the highs were really high for us and the lows were really low for us. But I remember him leaving, and I felt like, again, I feel alone, you know, and that's just how much power I give people in my life. And he ended up going off and doing his own thing. But what happened was I ended up failing that year of university, and I had to redo it. And by then, like that's when I'd obviously started drinking, and that stuff had picked up for me, and that stuff became all consuming. It was like about changing how I felt. And I constantly throughout the day, I wasn't going to classes. I wasn't writing my exams like I should have been. I was failing, and it was all about changing the way I felt, right? Because this person's just left me. Woe is me. My life is falling apart. And yeah, I ended up failing, and I had to redo it. And, today I connect to things differently, because what happened is, like, I'm sitting here with no debt at all because my parents were forking out money to have me stay in this place. And what I was doing was wasting their time, wasting my time, wasting their time, wasting their money. And I didn't have any connection to that. I had this expectation that my family is supposed to be there, and they're supposed to pick up the pieces, and they're supposed to love me regardless, and they're obligated to take care of me. And I remember pissing away that year, basically, but I managed to get my degree by the grace of God. And then from there, it's like everything just kind of unraveled for me. The wheels started falling off. I moved back to Kenya where my mom was staying. I was drinking. Like, I don't want to go too much into the war stories because you guys know this stuff. Like, this is stuff that we've all experienced in different ways, but we've all experienced it. My mom moved a couple times after that, and I moved with her. And all through that, it's like my brother was kind of in the shadows. So my brother's 3 years older than me, and I had this delusion that my brother was more loved, that he was more cared for than I was. And I look back at the person that I was and the lack of awareness that I had back then, and I just cringe because, like, my brother loves me, and my brother is loved as equally as I am. But my alcoholic brain at that time told me, you will never amount to anything, and your brother will always come out on top. And shame, I feel bad for my brother because he was never in competition with me. I was always the one in competition with him. And I resented him for it. I resented him for being loud and for being vivacious and just getting along with people. Because for me, it felt like I had to try harder. And I always wanted this brother and sister relationship, but I wasn't willing to work for it, right? And that's my pattern, is like, I want all these amazing things, but how much am I willing to actually work for them? And back then it was like not willing to work hard enough at all. And so, yeah, back in the sidelines while I'm doing my thing is my brother, who's doing things really well, and he's progressing in his career, and he's doing things the right way. And I'm sitting there jealous and resentful because I'm not there, And then, yeah, like I said, I start things really well. At some point, fast forward a couple years, I start a master's degree, and I thought at the time I really wanted to do it. I did. I would have told you back then, like, this is something I was meant to be doing. And I started this master's degree, and I started it well. But it wasn't very long until I stopped going to classes, and I started missing things, and I started failing assignments, and I dropped out. Again, like, same thing, is like no connection to my parents paying for this and me kind of wasting away the opportunity. But that's what I did. I started things really well, and I lost steam, because that's what happens to me. And I lost steam, and I remember lying through that, right? Because my parents were starting to get a little bit suspicious. How come you're not going, like, what's going on? And I was trying every which way I could to try and, like, falsify the grades or whatever, until it finally came to a head. And eventually I just dropped out. And then I meet another guy, and things kind of unravel again, as they do for me. Because again, I put all my power into this one person. And also the way I am is like, I'm manipulative and I'm dishonest. So in any group of people, my parents would look at the people that I was with. My family would look at the people that I was with and say, like, wow, you need to stop hanging out with those people. They're really bad for you. Like, what I know about myself today is, like, I was the bad person in that group. Like, I was the one influencing people to do things that they shouldn't have been doing. But that's, like, who I am, right? Like, I'm dishonest and I'm really manipulative, and my parents bought that, And this one relationship I ended up getting into, my mom was living in a different country than I was, and she ended up approaching this guy and telling him, "Stay away from my daughter." And I remember being so angry. I got so angry with her because I thought, there she goes again, meddling and trying to control me. Look, my parents were raising an alcoholic child and they didn't even know it. It wasn't until I sat down in my step 5 and my sponsor asked me, "Have you ever been a parent?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." "Do you know what it's like to raise an alcoholic child?" I was like, "No, I don't." Yet I had all these unrealistic expectations about how my parents should have parented me. I needed to be controlled. They needed to keep tabs on me because I was extremely dishonest. At 26, I landed up in my first rehab, and I went there because, my parents felt like I needed help. At that time, I didn't feel like I was an alcoholic. I shied away from that word alcoholic because I didn't present like an alcoholic. My idea of what an alcoholic was like the person in the park, drinking out of a brown paper bag and can barely hold down a job and can't keep their life together. I went from internship to internship. And the weird thing about this alcoholic thing is I set benchmarks for myself, right? So I would say, if I do this, then it probably means I'm an alcoholic. So if I start drinking in the morning, then maybe I have a problem. And then I started drinking in the morning, and then I was like, okay, there might be a problem there. So anyway, I went to my first rehab. And again, the manipulation, the dishonesty is, I went into this rehab and I drank from the time basically that I got there to the time that I left. Again, that's me telling you I'm not an alcoholic, but I can't even stop drinking. I think I was in there for about 3 weeks or 6 weeks. I can't even stop drinking, right? I'm forced to stop drinking because I'm in this place, but I won't even. But I don't have a problem. And that was the delusion that I held on to. I'm going to jump back a little bit because before I went into that rehab, one of the other benchmarks I'd set for myself about what an alcoholic was if I start to steal. And I remember living with my mom, and my mom has glaucoma, so it's a problem with her eyes. And I started stealing. Basically, I started stealing jewelry and I started stealing different things. And this was to feed my habit and go out with my friends. Again, it was that entitlement of, okay, you've cut me off financially, then I'm going to do whatever I can. And I started stealing from her. And I remember one day and I went to some shop. I went to Target. I went to a place called Target and I started buying things just knockoff jewelry, thinking she won't notice. And one day she opens her jewelry thing and she sees that it's missing. Starts crying, says to me, "How could you do this to me? Can't believe you've stolen from me." I look at her dead in the eyes and I say, I haven't done anything. Call the cops if you want to. That's who I am, right? And she's in tears. And what I didn't know about that jewelry back then was it was a gift. It was a gift from my dad. I think a 10-year anniversary gift that I stole. And that right then and there, it's I didn't have any remorse for that. The remorse came later. The guilt and shame came later when I connected to that. But at the time, it was well, you've cut me off. What am I supposed to do? Guys, I was 26. Should have had a job, Wasn't a kid. Should have really worked. But I didn't, And so I stole from her and, I lied to her. I lied straight to her face, because that's also what I do. My ability to kind of worm myself out of situations and tell you dead in the eyes and dead in the face, and you will not believe me, but you'll act like you believe me, is exactly what happened. And they decided I had a problem. And then I went into treatment that first time. And then I left, and my mom, being who she is, hired some person from a church to follow me around and live with me, because my parents were in different countries. I was in Zim. To live with me, follow me around, make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm manipulative, right? And I found I made a plan, and I started drinking again, and that's just what I knew, I honestly sit here and I tell you this with as much conviction as I can, that I believe that my parents at the time just were trying to do anything they could to help me. Anything and everything they could to help me. But The only thing that's worked for me is this, right? So this person that they hired doesn't work out for me, but the pain that I experienced, guys, in those 2 years before I ended up in treatment and at the house on the hill, yeah, it was painful. So at some point, my mom tells me, or my dad tells me, you need to move out, right? Like, it's time for you to get your stuff together and move out. So they put me in an apartment that they own. Didn't have to pay rent. Just had to pay for groceries, basically, which at some point they ended up paying for the groceries anyway. And they put me in this apartment, and my addiction, I feel like, just skyrocketed, right? Because on top of staying there on my own and trying to find my feet, it's like I was resentful as well. Again, that entitlement of, you don't get to throw me out of the house. I get to live here for as long as I want to, but since you are, I'm going to punish you. Like, and that's the irony of that, is I was punishing myself through that. But yeah, I started using something really hectic, and I remember being in fear because of this stuff. And I would call my mom. My dad was in a different country. My mom was on a whole different continent, and I would be calling them, telling them, please change the locks. Someone's outside. Or put cameras outside my door, because I know there are people there. Now I can sit down and like connect to what that does to a parent, right? Like a few years before then, I'd taken sleeping pills while I was drunk and had to go to an emergency room and get my stomach pumped. And here again, same kind of situation, as I'm calling my parents, and they're basically thinking, I can imagine, that I've lost my mind, because that's what was happening. Is like I was losing my mind. And the other benchmark I kind of set for myself of what an alcoholic is if I ever find out I'm pregnant and I'm using and I'm drinking, then I know there's a problem. But I found out I was pregnant, and I was sitting in this apartment, and I had blankets for curtains because I needed something really thick to just, so I couldn't see what was going on outside. And I felt like people were looking at me, right? So I found myself pregnant. Now I know I was 8 weeks pregnant. I was sitting on this bed. And we talk about moments of clarity in this program. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, this is the benchmark I'd set for myself. I never want to be pregnant and using and drinking, but that's where I found myself. And like I did, and like I do, I called my parents and I asked them for help, and they helped me. No connection at all to what that does to them. But the moment of clarity for me is like I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to be another statistic. Like, I don't want to be a single mother with a drug dealer for a partner, which is what he was. Again, I attract the sickest people. And what kind of life do I give my child, you know? I call it a moment of clarity, and that should have been my rock bottom, but it wasn't, because I continued to use for a few more months after that. And the other moment of clarity for me, I think this one was loud enough for me to hear, or clear enough for me to hear, is like I'd moved back home from my parents, so they removed me from this apartment. I'd moved back home, and my dad was staying in Zim at the time, and I was going to work, and I was drinking and using, and I was coming back home, and I was eating, and I was going to work, and same cycle over and over and over again. And I just remember my dad saying to me, why don't you ever spend time with me? That hit me like a ton of bricks, right? So I remember hitting my rock bottom, and it was an internal rock bottom. I was sitting on my bed in my room, and it was this feeling of, I can't do this anymore. Like, something needs to change. Like, I'm working this internship that would be perfect for anyone else to work, but I can't do it. And what I wanted to say to my dad at the time was, I want to spend time with you, but I can't do it sober. Because I couldn't. Living life sober, in the moments where we could just sit down and watch TV, couldn't even do that sober, you know? And that's when I said, like, I need help. And put in notice at this internship that I was working. The whole thing was fast-tracked. My parents and my brother, who I still was very resentful at, was on the sidelines looking for a place for me to go. He found the house on the hill, and I found this place in Joburg, and my disease chose this place. It was going to be perfect for me. And my parents said to me, no, you're going to go to this place. And I thought to myself, cool, I've committed to 3 months. I'm going to stay there for 3 months and it's going to be amazing. But I went into treatment this last time open-minded and willing. Like, the honesty came later for me, but I went in there open-minded and willing. And like I said, when I hit my rock bottom, I said to myself, something needs to change, and I was taking my first leap of faith, and I didn't even know it, because my relationship with faith now is like, I just kind of go for it. My higher power has protected me through situations that I shouldn't have walked out of alive even, but I'm sitting here today, and I had a really, really difficult relationship with God. Like, very, very difficult relationship with God. When I was in 2013, I saw my aunt die a really slow and painful death. And what I did with that was drink through it. I went to visit her and I was drunk through it. I look at that now and I have so much guilt and shame, because obviously she's not here to experience these milestones. And when I do have my first kid, she's not going to be there. And she doesn't get to see this stuff, right? And I wasted the amount of time that I had with her changing how I felt. And I had no connection at all to the fact that my cousins have just lost a mom. My mom and her sister and my aunt have just lost a sister. It's like I make anything about myself. Don't know how to make anything not about myself, right? And so I had a really difficult relationship with God, because I looked at her in pain and I thought to myself, if there's a God, then how come this stuff is happening to someone who's so good, someone who's so devoted, and someone who's so religious and follows every commandment that you should follow? Why does that happen to her? And that's like the delusion for me again, because my higher power protected me. I was so protected and I was so loved and I was so cared for. So when I went into this treatment center, I was open-minded and I was willing enough to say, cool, my way isn't working. It's not working. For the past 2 years, I've been hell. It's not working for me. So I was open-minded. So when they said to me, get on your knees and just try, I said, okay, cool, I'll try. Like, be open-minded. I said, okay, I will. And I was, but I was also very dishonest, you guys. Like, there were a lot of defects that I had that I wasn't willing to let go of. Like, my people-pleasing, this wanting and needing to be accepted and to be loved. Like, that was really hard for me to let go of. And I got a consequence when I was in treatment to bring a concern at every concern group. And I'm grateful for that today, because I can call people out today and I can love people differently. And that's been amazing. Like, what treatment taught me was that love is an action. And today I show people that I love them. Like, I can sit here and cry talking about the person that I was, but I know with conviction today that I'm a different person. That I love my mom differently. That I love my dad differently. That I try with them than my aunt, who I was very resentful at because she called me out and she was really assertive with me. Like, I love her today. And I don't just say it. Like, I show it. And I show it in my actions. So yeah, and then I obviously, like I said, the honesty came later, because what would happen is I kind of went through 2 months of treatment, not ever being concerned, because I was putting up a front, because that's what I do. I put up masks, and but what would happen is I'd present one way to the group, and then to my sponsor, I would tell her every dodgy thing that I was doing, and I would have my very own little concern group in the back, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I met one person in there that I felt like I could be honest with, because I was, and she didn't judge me for it. And I remember doing my step 5, and I did my step 5, and I realized in that moment that I'd gotten a lot of things wrong, right? Like, a lot of things around my family and my parents and my friends and the way that I was, like, all the old ideas, I'd gotten things so wrong. And that guilt and shame came. Couple days after my step 5, I did I got a call from my mom, and she told me that my brother had gotten married, and I was shattered, right? Because my idea is like, you don't get to celebrate a good day without me. Like, this is your special day. How can you get married and not include me? And I was shattered. So fast forward, I just went on a trip and I was in Zim with my parents, and my brother set up this really special moment to help me meet his girlfriend. And like, that's how different things are for me today. Is like, I was shattered after he got married without me there because I couldn't connect to, I was such a toxic part of my family unit that for him to celebrate a good day, I would not, he didn't want me to be a part of it. Like, that's how terrible I was, right? That's how sick I was. And the fact that fast forward 2 years later, he's having me meet his girlfriend, and he's feeling safe to help me, to have me meet her, is amazing. And I think it's testament of how powerful this program is. And that relationship with my brother is a work in progress, like all of my relationships. And I try to be consistent in that relationship with him. And yeah, I made amends to my parents this past year, and it was difficult, but it was amazing because I've learned to take responsibility. Like, I used to shy away from responsibility, but I took responsibility for my actions, and I told them, look, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but what was incredible is my sorry had weight and it had substance, and they were able to accept it. And my dad said to me, you didn't even need to apologize because I've seen you do it. Like, I've seen you do this. And that was amazing, and that was big. My sponsor at the end of treatment told me, go to the halfway house. So if my higher power had told me, you're going to stay in treatment for 4 months, you're going to stay in the halfway house for 11, and you're going to go work this humble job, mopping floors and cooking for people you don't know, and like, sometimes you're not going to like it very much. You're not going to like the people that you live with very much. But just hold on, like, things are going to get better. I would have been like, no, thanks, just keep it. But I stayed the course, and I stayed in that halfway house, and I have friends today, obviously, and I learned how to work hard, and I learned how to be consistent, and it was difficult, but I got through it, and that's my life today, is just me and my sponsor pushing me and me getting through it and having this fellowship to kind of bring me in when I'm going the wrong way, or when my disease is taking hold and telling me to isolate because it feels safer to be alone sometimes. It's like I have people in this fellowship that love me through it, and they bring me in. So yeah, life is good today. And again, like, I sit here, and the guilt and shame, the periods of the guilt and shame now have become a lot farther apart, because I do the next right thing today. I try to do the next right thing, and I don't get it right. Like, sometimes I get it really wrong, but thank God this is a program of progress, not perfection, and I don't have to be perfect. And like my friend reminds me, if I was perfect, I wouldn't need to be here. But I get it wrong, but I try today. To the best of my ability, I try. I just want to end off with this, because this was amazing. So my aunt, who I spoke about last year, I got to go to her gravesite, and I made indirect amends in a way that you can make indirect amends to someone who's passed on, and that moment felt freeing. So my idea of freedom and what I thought freedom meant for me and active is so different now. Freedom for me today means getting up and doing things and not feeling like I need to use or drink through it. Freedom for me looks like, even though my mom doesn't like me smoking, it's like I pay for my own cigarettes today. It's like, that's what freedom for me means. It means that I get to make my own decisions, and I don't have that stuff hanging over me. And freedom for me means, like, I get to sit here and I get to share this, and despite the fear, I show up regardless, and that's amazing. So I'm super grateful for you guys, every single person here, and it's grateful for this program and grateful to my higher power because I know for a fact that I would not be sitting here 2 years down the line without some sort of relationship with a power greater than myself. So yeah, that's my story. Thanks.